Welcome to Watching the Throne.
A lyrical analysis of Kanye West.
My name is Chris Lambert.
And my name is Travis Bean, and this is going to be a tough one, Chris. Are you ready for this?
I have been ready for this since the last time we did it. No, I haven't recovered since the last time we did it.
Have you been reading up on Pinocchio?
I watched the Disney movie. I read the original story. No, I did neither of those things. But
Pinocchio, the Disney movie, that was a big one for me as a kid. Is that one you watched a lot?
Yeah, I was watching that one. Little Mermaid came out when I was, same with you, when we were really young. So I wasn't getting as much into the classics as I was starting to get into some of the late 80s, early 90s Disney movies. But I still remember having a little bit of a Pinocchio phase, Snow White phase.
Yeah, I had Snow White myself, Sleeping Beauty, Bambi. Oh yeah, I had them all on VHS and watched them all the time. I had all those and Aladdin.
Yeah, Rescuers Down Under.
Oh yeah.
And then Fievel was another big one.
Yeah, that was one I never really watched actually, although I've seen parts of it.
I feel like you would still love Fievel Goes West.
TBD. We'll have to find out someday.
Yeah. But yeah, Disney did not prepare me for what the actual story of Pinocchio is.
Yeah, right.
Which we'll get into on this episode. But man, getting to the end of 808s and Heartbreak and getting to Pinocchio Story again, it feels much more emotional. And we were hit emotionally the first time we covered this song, but man, this song just in my estimation continues to get stronger and stronger and more impressive as the years go by.
I completely agree. I sat down to listen to it today, and maybe I always have this feeling before I listen to Pinocchio Story, but in my head I was like, God, every song on 808s is incredible. Immaculately produced, so all the little subtleties and nuances, it's so incredible. And I step back and I'm like, well, Pinocchio Story, it can't be as good as that. It's just a live performance. It's outside of something like that. I can appreciate Pinocchio Story, but it's not as good as a song. And then I listened to Pinocchio Story and I'm just I'm crumbling by the end of it. I'm so moved by it. It's moving in the way I think streetlights can be. It really transcends what we think of music, which is why I think it is on the level of any song on 808s. It isn't produced like any of those songs, but it kind of steps above that in a way. It's outside of what we think of as music and steps into more just art territory. It's very performative. Yeah. It's something you'd see in art installation. It's what we saw Kanye do at the Donda listening party. It does feel like that. And I think that's why this song always continues to floor me, as maybe you were alluding to, is the more we learn about Kanye, the more we see him go through this journey of celebrity, of family, of figuring himself out. Pinocchio Story seems to carry more and more meaning and importance as we go on. It feels like it is just this profound look into Kanye's soul. He's just so naked and open and vulnerable in this in a way that I'm not sure he is on any other song.
Yeah, it's kind of a perfect crescendo of everything that had been going on in his discography up to this point, because you go back to the real albums, right, in terms of Kanye not being a celebrity, but just being a person who is rapping on College Dropout and Late Registration, and how vulnerable they are, how open they are, how many people listened to those things and felt like they knew Kanye and related to Kanye. And then you start getting into Graduation and Kanye ascends. He places himself and starts to place himself above others. I am a superstar now. I am great. I'm living this life. You can't even imagine it. And then you get to 808s where he really starts reflecting on reaching that point. And to have Pinocchio Story be the thing that really strips away all of the artifice and gets to just him again. It's like this last moment of college dropout Kanye coming to the forefront and speaking out on things, which I always think about this song in terms of All Falls Down. And it's just like All Falls Down. He saw what the road to riches and diamond rings did to people. And then now he's that person that is suffering. Like, it's just a crazy full circle moment, and not anything, obviously not something intended, but it feels just something out of a movie script. I love it so much. And I used to skip this song back in like 2007, 2000, or not 2007. The album wasn't out. 2008, when the album came out, I would listen to it. I'd be like, oh, I don't like that there's not like music. It's just him talking. And I just go back to the beginning. It wasn't until like 2012, 2013, I was like, oh,
I see what Kanye's doing.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a totally legitimate way to think about the song if you're looking at it outside of the Kanye narrative or the 808s narrative. Like, it is just like any other concert track. It's even worse in a way. Like, it's just Kanye freestyling over like nothing and people are screaming over him. Like, it's not enjoyable of a listen, like on its surface. But you know, that's why we love it now, and maybe why other people who listen to the show who think of Kanye on that narrative level of it now is that it works because of Kanye's story.
Yep.
And it works because it exists so outside the sound of 808s and comments directly on what's happening in 808s and comments directly on, like you're saying, what he's talked about his entire career, like All Falls Down or Diamonds from Sierra Leone. Look, spend your whole life trying to get that ice on a polo rugby. It looks so nice. How could something so raw make me feel so right? It's all these we've seen Kanye have these realizations throughout his career and know the path he needs to go down. Yet Pinocchio Story, we're on the other side of that. Kanye, he knew what he needed to not do, but he never did it not do it. Like, he always did it, and now he becomes a wizened figure in that way. Even though he made a ton of mistakes and alienated people and ruined so many parts of his life, like, he comes out the other side of that wise. Like, he's ready to, he knows right from wrong. He knows like what he should and shouldn't do, and that doesn't even necessarily mean that he's going to stop doing it. We know he doesn't if we look forward at his discography. But here on Pinocchio Story, it's such a beautiful moment where we capture him right in the spot where he's right on the other side of all of these like innocent, dewy-eyed things he used to talk about. Like, that's all in the past now. The decisions he made, like, he's past that. Like, this is him now. Like, what he has done with his life, the celebrity he wanted to become, like, this is it. And there's no escaping that anymore.
Yeah, he can't turn back the clock and say, you know what, sorry, I want to go back to how things were, especially with the loss of his mom, because she, I think in many ways, was the biggest thing in terms of who he had been, right? Like, he associates himself with Chicago, sure, but he's his mother's son. So it's like, even if he leaves Chicago, even if he loses the connection to Chicago, it's his mom that's really the anchor to his childhood, his past life, how things were. And with her gone, you just can't go back to that anymore. Like, really, the symbol of all of that is now gone. And it's like, you could give it all up, you could leave, but where are you going to go? You can't return to the past. And Kanye looking ahead to the future in this song is just very devastating. And what you're talking about in terms of what he learns through this journey, it reminds me of the poems of William Blake, which, you know, casual comparison everyone makes.
I read about William Blake at I think a college class I took.
Yeah, right. You talk about the lamb and the tiger. The chimney sweeper is a big one. Mm-hmm. But William Blake had the poems of innocence and the poems of experience.
Right.
And he would write these poems from the perspective of someone who's innocent, like the chimney sweeper. you get this poem of just like, oh, I sweep chimneys, how great. And then on the flip side of the experience, it's like, oh, we all die of black lung, which is just so sad. And then the lamb and the tiger, like the lamb's the innocence, the tiger's experience. And it's just like the first part of Kanye's discography is innocence. And you get college dropout, late registration, graduation as enjoying the innocence. And then, as you're saying with 808s, the innocence kind of disappears. And there's a lot of pain going on throughout. And Pinocchio's story is this moment of clarity, just this calm in the center of the storm. And then we go out the other side, and Kanye, knowing what he knows about how life goes, it just ends up on this self-destructive path on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Yeezus and parts of The Life of Pablo, and even getting into Watch the Throne and Cruel Summer in a lot of ways. And you're seeing more of this experienced Kanye who's just self-destructing until he really gets a grip and comes out the other side of that journey now and goes from like innocence to experience to kind of transcended. And we're still currently in this transcended, reflective period of Kanye that's post The Life of Pablo, getting into Yay, Kids See Ghost, Jesus is King, and now Donda, which are all very cathartic albums in different ways.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you made about just thinking the place he's in from My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy through most of The Life of Pablo and the way he's acting. There's a real assuredness to him, even though like he knows, like Kanye the artist knows, and is definitely like hinting at us like, hey, like I shouldn't be acting like this. Like that's all there the whole time, that Kanye is going down this destructive path. He here at the end of 808s, I'm thinking of like the trajectory of 808s is just down, 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 down. It's all downward. Kanye just wallowing in his pain, his misery, his loneliness. He can't get past it until Coldest Winter, which is the worst of it all. I've lost my mom. I've lost everything. Like, can spring turn things around, or is everything going to melt away? Like, it's just like, oh my God, like, how does he go up from here? And then we get Pinocchio Story, which, like you said, it's him just in the spot. He's on the other side of it, and he's almost like, he's sad, and and he wants a connection with the world, but he knows he's not going to get it from the crowd he's doing this improvisation for. And he knows, like, it's almost like he knows that he's just on the other side of it now, and this is the place I'm in. And he almost feels like not complacent, but like at peace with that spot. Like, he has lost his mom, he has made all of these decisions that has alienated him. Celebrity isn't what he thought it would be. And instead of just like wallowing further, which can like send you down a really dangerous path, he decides to like combat it with the energy we see from him for like several years after that on his music. It's becomes less, it's just as depressing in that way, because even though he's not just like steeping in his misery and crying, he's out of control. He doesn't know how to handle it, so he just goes completely the opposite direction. Like, him losing his mom really did make him lose himself, which is why it's so, like, what you're talking about with Yay and Kitsy Ghost and The End of Life of Pablo and Donda, Jesus is King. Like, suddenly there's catharsis. He's able to move past it in a healthy way. He's finally able to process his mother's death and who he has become and how he can live a more fulfilling life as a celebrity. He's finally figuring it out. But it took him a long time to get there, and Pinocchio Story feels like the very beginning of that journey where he just like feels completely lost and is combating it in a very unhealthy way.
You talk about him being on the other side of kind of the pain or accepting like where he's at in some ways, and it feels like he is, oh, what was the word that was just in my head? Acceptance. Is it like, it is combative, but it's also it's like he's giving up in some ways in terms of like, I want to be a real boy, but this is just all there is for me at this point, is to dive into the maelstrom of celebrity, because that's all people want from me, and there's nothing else that I can really do with myself. So fine, like, I'll just be this person, and he becomes kind of this monstrous entity, as you're talking about, we see over the next couple albums. So it is such a sad tipping point to see someone who in this moment is calling out for help and really registering something in terms of, I don't want this to be my life, but not knowing any other way of living, and what ends up going that path. And we know that Kanye, like, as the person, had a lot of happiness in this time. Well, I guess it still took a number of years before he finally like started dating Kim and like settled into like having a family. But I imagine Kanye it wasn't all depressive from 2008 to 2011 when he started dating Kim, to 2012. But yeah, it seems like it was probably an intense period and still like going through a lot of emotions.
Yeah, it's just, I guess it was a very slow, gradual journey with Kanye, and that's the awesome part, I think, of evaluating his art in the way we do. Like, Kanye isn't necessarily, well, probably isn't thinking of any of these things as he's like making his albums and like planning out narratives. Like, we just see Kanye going through these motions. We see all of his albums are an expression of his internal demons, and it doesn't necessarily have to be about like the exact thing he's going through or an exact situation. Every time he's talking about women in his songs or painting relationships, like, he's just always talking about the relationship with himself, with his music, with him just finding meaning, period. Like, so it as we talk about Jesus and My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and kind of how agitated those albums can sound at points, it's because, like, again, that's just an expression of how he's feeling and how he's trying to get back to this person he used to be, and he can't get there. And a huge part of that is him losing his mom, and that's what makes Pinocchio Story such a beautiful encapsulation of time. And like, we catch him right in that moment where he's like dealing with that loss, like right then, like in the first year he loses his mom. This is such, I don't know, it's just so poignant and so real. This song is just so fucking real. It's just like, it's hard to even handle.
Yeah. And then Kanye, well, should we start getting into more of the details around the song?
Yeah.
We have 2 live performances of this. Well, they aren't the original performance, right? Mm-hmm. There's the VH1 Storytellers performance in 2010. Mm-hmm. And on that one, Kanye pairs Pinocchio Story with Heartless, which, if you go back to our Heartless episode, we talk about this in a little more detail, but it comes after the second verse and second chorus. Kanye gets into this bridge about like, talk, baby, let's just knock it off. They don't know about what we've been through. Oh God, it's way below that. Gets into the chorus again, another bridge, and then gets into this third verse where he goes, "There is no Gucci I can buy. There is no Louis Vuitton to put on." So he starts associating the end of the relationship that he's describing on Heartless and the pain of that with the attempts at trying to self-soothe through money, through spending, through consumerism, and the inability to do that, and building up to that to live a real life. I just want to be a real boy. So he really, in this VH1 Storytellers performance, connects the loss of Alexis Pfeiffer, the loss of this romantic partnership, with his struggles with celebrity and fame, which, getting to what Travis, you were just saying about how every time he talks about relationships, it's not just about that relationship with like Alexis or Amber Rose or Kim. It's also about how he's feeling about himself and public. So the fact that Heartless ties into this on the VH1 Storytellers feels very poignant and fitting. And then the second one was the 2015 Hollywood Bowl performance. And that one is just kind of staggering, I think, when you see the imagery for it. Kanye comes out. He's most of the performance is very theatrical, like slow theater. I don't know if that's actually a term, but it's a lot of posturing, like people are in a painting. It's a lot of like static shots where Kanye's just sitting on stairs, or you have a woman representing his mom and a woman representing Alexis Pfeiffer kind of standing there while Kanye performs around them. It's imagery driven, but almost like he's embodying a still photo.
Right.
And then at the very end, he comes out in, how would you describe it? Like a mummy suit?
It's like I almost wonder if it's like a Pinocchio like suit, like he's supposed to be a wooden person.
Oh, I could see that. It looks very padded, but I could see it being like supposed to be wood. Like he's just someone carved of wood, and he's using very, like he's doing the robot movements like that. But if he was a puppet, it does feel like kind of the movements a puppet would make.
That's all I could think the whole time. Like the kind of shots they were doing, like you get a couple shots like above him, like we're looking down at him and like dangling him by strings or something.
Yeah, and the staircase, there's been a dramatic staircase on set, and he's standing in front of it, and there's just a light on him that's projecting his shadow on the staircase.
Yeah.
And there's a few times where you just get like the shadow moving, which feels kind of relevant to Kanye feeling so insubstantial as a real person. He's like a shadow person rather than a real person. It's just very compelling. The fact that he's like faceless as he performs it, the fact that his movements aren't his movements or aren't like natural movements. It's powerful. Like, and what an epic way to end that he has the full costume change and really dehumanizes himself in that moment. I think encapsulates how dehumanized he's feeling in the song itself, which My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Jesus and Life of Pablo, very dehumanized versions of Kanye as he's like embodying this fantastical version of himself, like calling himself a monster. On Yeezus, he is not him, but Yeezus. And on The Life of Pablo, he's embodying the idea of like the Pablo figure. So for those 3 albums, Kanye really wasn't being himself. I mean, he was, but hopefully you get what I mean by that.
Yeah, I feel like the Hollywood Bowl performance, it's like another case where this song feels very prescient. Like it feels so important to Kanye's career because it would go on to be used in these really interesting ways like years later. Like here, this is a couple years after 808s and Heartbreak. And it's, well, I mean, first of all, it seems like the first use of Kanye putting on a mask, right? Like he kind of has a face that's similar to what we're seeing him do now.
At the Hollywood Bowl?
Yeah, because of like the head he has on.
Yes. I mean, he had worn the Yeti mask back in like 2011, 2012. And then, of course, the Yeezus performance mask. But then having the Hollywood Bowl mask, it was the first, like, yeah, he's in this suit and he is like kind of taking himself out of the equation.
Yeah. Oh, I guess all I'm getting at is that I think a big part of the mask, like a big part of the symbolism is obviously removing your face, but like kind of removing yourself and who you are, moving the ego a bit, like creating this faceless figure who is going down this new path and trying to reconstruct themselves. It reminds me of Pinocchio and how he wants to be a real boy. He wants to start a real life, but he can't until like he finds out how to be a real boy. He has to like construct himself that way. And this feels in that vein. And like that big staircase reminds me of the Yeezus Mountain. Like it just feels, there are elements of this that I feel like we would see Kanye to go on to use in other ways. But I think the most important thing I would note from the Hollywood Bowl performance and the VH1 Storytellers is like how produced each of those versions are. And how they became these big things full of meaning and symbolism and images. And like he's taking this thing that on 808s and Heartbreak is so simple and naked and raw, and that becomes the foundation, like just the inherent meaning of what it represented on 808s and how it needed to have everything stripped away for it to be powerful, now suddenly has like all of these elements that we'll go on to see Kanye use to represent all of these other things he's struggling with. Like so many of the things in Kanye's career can be traced back, I feel like, to this song.
Yeah. And we could spend like an hour, I think, just gushing over the fact that it is a stripped down live version compared to the production of everything else. You mentioned it several times, but every time you say it, I'm just like, what a great, like in terms of form and function, like you hear Paranoid, and like Paranoid is just this like jam, but it's getting at very serious issues in a relationship. You hear Love Lockdown and it's so emotional, but it's also very beautiful. Same with Say You Will. And it's just like, yeah, all the beauty just taken out because he's just getting at like, this is no longer an artist making a commercial thing, but an actual kind of just cry for help. And he's taking away the artistry and getting at like, I am a person saying this.
Right.
And
yeah, I love it. I mean, you're totally right. That is a very bold decision to make, to like be like, no production on this, like no anything. It's just me freestyling.
Yeah. I mean, you have a little bit of the ambient music back there, but
right.
It's easily forgettable.
The crowd is louder than the music.
Yeah. Okay, so Pinocchio Story. Do we want to talk about Pinocchio Story now, or do we want to talk about it when we get to the chorus?
You mean the Adventures of Pinocchio?
Yeah, the Adventures of Pinocchio.
Okay. I was like, I assume we'll be talking about Pinocchio Story the whole time. No, we'll talk about it when we get to it, I think.
Okay, so that means, I mean, do you have production notes before we get into the intro portion?
Yeah, no, that's the best part of this song. There isn't much to talk about production-wise. All
right. The only like precursor note is that when you watch there's one YouTube video that somebody who was at the Singapore performance has on there on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And you can hear Kanye say things before he actually gets to the wise man say portion, where he's talking about like there being other fish in the sea and kind of, I couldn't make out everything he was saying, but it was clearly just starting to get into the fact that how do I move on from this relationship? Right. Was one of the initial precursors. And then he starts getting into this intro where he says, wise men say, wise men say, wise men say, you'll never figure out love. So it just seemed like he cut off the other fish in the sea part to just kind of get at something that was a little more impactful
Elvis-y?
up front. Yeah, Elvis-y. Oh, what a nice transition, Travis. So wise men say is actually the first three lines. I mean, it's a common thing. Like, you've heard other people say, like, oh, the wise man says. Yeah. But Elvis used it in his, what year was this? 1961 hit, Can't Help Falling in Love. Oh, which I couldn't remember how it went. So then I played the first few notes and I was like, oh, this song.
Yeah. It's one of the most recognizable songs ever. I mean, I've heard this song like so many times. Like, my grandma loved Elvis and played Elvis all the time. And yeah, I have fond memories of this and Blue Hawaii, just like in general. And it's just such a beautiful song and like the perfect song to be the antithesis to Pinocchio Story.
Speaking of antitheses, I, for some reason as a kid, hated Elvis. Uh-huh. And there was a family in my neighborhood that was babysitting me one time. And for some reason, it had come up that I hate Elvis. And they played Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog in a van that we were riding in. And I like lost my shit.
You liked it?
And no, I was just not Elvis. And I'm like 4 or 5 years old, yelling about Elvis being on the radio. And just remember this like van full of people laughing at how outraged I was.
So Elvis is the soundtrack to your misery.
Yeah. And for you, it's a lovely memory with your grandmother.
Yeah, I even used to dress up as Elvis.
Really?
Yeah, because my grandma had like a bunch of like outfits and shit, and she loved Elvis. Like, I had pictures of him everywhere. Like, it was actually kind of creeping out of them looking at it in retrospect, but still fun for little kids to dress up as.
Yeah. Did you try like doing the little swirl with your hair?
The hair, the hip thrusting, the everything.
I think we all tried to do the Elvis hip thrust at some point. We all tried. But that song starts off with saying, "Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Shall I stay? Would it be a sin if I can't help falling in love with you?" And then, like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. Take my hand, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you. And then that just kind of repeats.
Yeah.
But you get this idea of wise men giving counsel. And in Elvis's case, he's like, yeah, I hear what the wise men are saying, but like, I can't help how I'm feeling and I'm falling in love with you. And, should we do this thing? Should we give it a try? Like, take my hand and like, screw the wise men. And then Kanye starts Pinocchio Story with just like, wise men say you'll never figure out real love. And that to me just kind of gets back to this like William Blake idea. Not that Kanye was thinking of William Blake,
Right.
but this idea of like innocence versus experience. Like Elvis is in that innocent stage of, I hear these things, but like, I'm in love, let's do this. And Kanye's on the other end of this relationship falling apart and maybe has a little more appreciation for what wise men say in terms of like, only fools rush in.
Right.
And he's just like, you'll never figure out real love. And I think to him, he's taking it way more seriously. And it's like, yeah, how great of a way to end an album about heartbreak by calling back to one of the most iconic love songs of all time and flipping the idea of like, I'm going to rush into love with, you'll never figure out real love. Ooh.
Yeah. That's I feel like you just hit the nail on the head of why this is probably an interpolation. And I think some people probably, and I could see somebody rolling their eyes at this a little bit and say like that's a reach, but I feel like that would, maybe you're failing to realize like how big of a song that Elvis song is. Like it's such a classic song that so many people know. Like maybe a younger generation today wouldn't, but like it's huge. And I think it stayed in the culture for like a long time. Like this is a song I heard as a kid and everything. Like it's out there. And the fact that it's like that famous and they're both starting that way, wise men say, and I think the biggest part of it is, like you said, Elvis starts with wise men say, and the entire song will then be against why the wise man is wrong. Like Elvis is talking about how much he loves this person, how sure he is, like listen to this music and how beautiful it flows. Like real love like this can only come from real love. Like it's real. But Kanye immediately agrees with the wise man. Just like cuts it off right at the knees. You'll never figure out love, and kind of like seems accepting of it and very defeated. And it really, and I think most importantly, it goes against the feel of a song like I can't help falling in love with you. Like it's that song is so produced and made for radio and easygoing. In a way, it's stripped of all of that. It's live, it's improvised. There's really not much production. There are people screaming and not listening to what he's saying, like not vibing with what he's saying. He all of that is just confirmation of the fact that he won't find real love. He's just so accepting of it now.
Yeah, just opposite ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then to people that are still doubting Kanye's listening to Elvis, November 23rd, 2008, at the American Music Awards at the Nokia Theater in Los Angeles, Kanye started giving a speech where he said he wants to thank everybody. He's trying to break new boundaries in music. I wake up in the morning and just think about what stereotypes I'm going to break. We push the envelope with the last album, which would be 808s and Heartbreak. I wake up in the morning, I just think about what stereotypes to break. We push the envelope. Okay, this article is horribly formatted. With records they thought wouldn't play on urban radio. And it's our responsibility as musicians to keep pushing each other and keep competing with with each other and keep competing with each other. Oh my God, this article. It's really great competition. I see artists like Beyonce, Alicia Keys, Rihanna, Chris Brown, Chris Martin, all in the same music. And we're going to push music to the point where it was like in the 60s and 70s, where you talk about Led Zeppelin and Hendrix and the Beatles. We will be the new Beatles and the new Hendrix. They say in any other industry, you're supposed to get better than the past, like computers should get smaller and faster. But whenever you say, I want to be Elvis, they say, what's wrong with you? Well, I want to be Elvis. And then there were rumors in August of 2013 that Kanye was talking about buying Graceland, which is the like iconic home of Elvis Presley that still has tours, I do believe. But yeah, and in this article, it says Kanye has always been intrigued by Elvis, especially his influence in bringing blues and gospel music to the masses. Kanye thinks owning Graceland and restoring it to its former glory would cement his place in showbiz history. So nothing ended up coming about from that, and it still could be just a rumor, but it would be interesting if that was actually true.
I think Kanye should just get the estate because he just passed Elvis with the most Billboard hits. So, well,
that's
not the
right,
most, but he has more than Elvis, so he should get it.
Yeah, there was something about that, right? Like 22, like in the top 10 or something.
It was like, I think at this point, Kanye has like 100 something, like 113 in the top 100. So just on the Billboard charts, period.
That's pretty crazy. Okay.
Yeah. But Drake has like the most and has more than twice as many as Kanye.
Okay, so Drake passed Elvis a long time ago.
Yes.
But Kanye getting there. We'll see
Kanye's
how Donda
Kanye.
does.
So he gets
Donda could add 20 more. I hope every song from Donda just ends up on the Billboard charts.
Another interesting fact about the Billboard charts, Taylor Swift has had a run now where every single song on her last 3 albums has made the Billboard charts.
Okay, that's crazy too.
So that's how popular she is.
That is crazy too. Anyway, so Elvis and Kanye, there are some reasons to suspect that Kanye would know this song and be making a reference to it. Yep. Regardless of whether it's an Elvis reference or not, you still have this idea of
right.
He's hearing that these people who are smart, these people who are wise, when Kanye is feeling out of sorts and doesn't have necessarily the role model in his life that he used to have. Like his mom was the person he would go to for advice, and now she's gone. And now he's just hearing these wise men say, like, you'll never figure out real love. And he can't talk to his mom about it. Like, are they right? Are they wrong? Like, what's next for me? Which makes those voices all the more impactful and influential.
Right.
So it's just like starting off this song in a pretty like negative place.
Mm-hmm.
So then we get the first verse. It's so crazy, crazy, crazy. I got everything figured out, but for some reason, I can never find what real love is about. No doubt. Which everything figured out. His career is taken off. He's successful. You think about him in fashion. Like his fashion was already very well put together and starting to make waves. It just seemed like he could do no wrong in his artistic choices and career choices, except his relationships. Like they keep falling apart. And yeah, when you have everything in the world figured out, but I can never seem to find what real love was about. And you get that twist from like what it is about to what it was about, which I like because it shows kind of a difference in time. Is present tense or was is past tense. So it's almost like embodying the arc of the album. Like I'm struggling to figure out this relationship, and now the relationship is over and I'm still struggling to figure out like what it was, what happened. And it just kind of is a quick change in time.
Yeah, I love that switch. Like it's not even that is like present. It's like ever present. Like if he's ever going to figure out what love is, like it, how you define yourself, like what you're chasing, like what inspires you, what makes life worth living, like that's love. And that's such a perfect counterpoint to like, I got everything figured out. Kanye thought he had everything figured out because he went down this path of like, well, if I have this and I have that and I do these things and I sell this many records, like I have it figured out. Like I'm reaching people and I'll be happy. But none of that ever happened for him. He found out living this life wasn't fulfilling. And so he didn't have everything figured out. He didn't know what real love was about. And that didn't hit him until, everything had screwed up.
Yep. Yeah. Which, like, what a liar, too, in the chicken soup for the artist's soul or whatever it was when we were looking back on Welcome to Heartbreak in that episode.
Yeah.
Where he's just like, I understand what I signed up for. And right. I'm just like, a little sad at times, but but I know, like, I have my fans. And then he has this song on the same album where he's just like, this is miserable. This is awful. Like, you all don't understand me.
Yeah, and it's such a counter to like things on the album itself. Like thinking about Welcome to Heartbreak and him talking about like, he's seeing pictures of this guy's kids and all he has is pictures of his cribs. Like he's being very open about the fact that he does not have everything figured out. Like these are just like things that fill his life that he thought would make him happy.
And that's where you can really start to pinpoint what he means by real life, right? We have these moments on the album where he's kind of revealed to us what it feels like he is lacking, especially in Welcome to Heartbreak. So that this feels like very much the payoff to that, where right. That was a super produced and artsy version of things that's still kind of a bop. Now you have the reality of the situation with all of that artifice stripped away, though he's still rhyming,
and being just way more at the front about what he's saying. Like, do you think I'd sacrifice real life for all the fame and flashing lights? Like, we know you did that. Like, this is you aren't asking us, like, do you think I would? Like, we all saw you do it.
Yeah. And flashing lights, like, once again, we talk about, and fans, like a lot of people talk about Kanye's use of lights throughout his discography, from flashing lights to all of the lights to ultra light beam, and how it's kind of always a stand-in for this idea of the limelight and fame. With ultra light beam, the limelight's replaced by God's light, and he does the same thing with Cuddy montage, like shine your light on me, save me please. So we're seeing him kind of getting out of the limelight and replacing it with like this heavenly divine light. But it is, I think, telling that he associates fame and flashing lights and uses them together here as just kind of that basis for when people analyze his discography in their own ways and are just like, oh yeah, Kanye's relationship with the flashing lights and fame. Like, this is imagery that he thinks about and will continue to use throughout his discography.
Yeah, that whole journey he has of lights is incredible. That'll just never stop paying off, especially now, that he's reconnected with God.
Yeah. And now we have, there's no Gucci I can buy. There's no Louis Vuitton to put on. There's no YSL they could sell to get my heart out of this hell and my mind out of this jail. So such intense lines. And like Gucci, Louis Vuitton, YSL, all top tier fashion brands. And Kanye has talked throughout his career up to this point about how much brands had meant to him. Like, you think about Champion, where he's saying like when he'd go to the store, his dad would tell him to close his eyes because he would see these clothes and want to buy them. He's talked about purchasing these things on other songs. And then in particular, you have All Falls Down, where Kanye starts getting into consumerism and saying how many people use consumerism as a means to fill a void that they're otherwise feeling. I promise I'm so self-conscious. That's why you see me with at least one of my watches. Rollies and Poshas done drove me crazy. I can't even pronounce nothing past that for Sacy. Then I spent $400 on this just to be like, you ain't up on this. I can't even go to the grocery store without some ones that's clean and a shirt with a team. It seemed we live in the American dream, but the people highest up got the lowest self-esteem. Kanye is higher than he's ever been at this point in his career, and his self-esteem has never been lower. The prettiest people do the ugliest things for the road to riches and diamond rings. And then what's the line that I forgot last time? That's
we buy.
Yeah. We buy a lot of clothes, but we don't really need them. Things we buy cover up what's inside, because they made us hate ourselves and love they wealth. So, yeah, like Kanye is saying, like, I can't buy any of this stuff to like make up for the pain that I'm feeling, but I'm gonna try. Like, that's what we see over the next few albums, that he tries to cover up that pain with whatchamacallit, hedonism and indulgence, and it just still doesn't work.
Yeah, that line, to get my heart out of this hell and my mind out of this jail, and everything he's commenting, all the lines around that, and the commentary that's going on there, because as you've pointed out, he's talked about this so many times in his career, and like we said at the beginning of the episode, he's on the other side of that now. He's no longer can just like look at the situation like naively and think like, oh, like you can't live your life this way. Like, he is living his life this way. He is going to continue to buy all of these things to like, and he's going to keep going down this dangerous road because he doesn't know how else to live. But it's also, I love this line because it at the same time, it's a commentary, I feel like, on 808s. And so much of the stuff we talked about this season, and how the auto-tune becomes a representation of this jail, this prison he feels trapped in, how we can't escape this life, and the heartbeat that we hear throughout the album that's mimicked by the 808s, and how hellish it can feel and out of control and random. Those become motifs and just like these symbolic representations of his psyche throughout the album. And I love that line so much for commenting on that, because again, this line exists outside of all of that production. It is just like raw and real. Like, he really is on the other side of that now, in the sense that he's not somebody who's just going to sit around being depressed about everything. Like, he's starting this journey out of that. And all of these lines seem to fit in with that, because it's not like he goes on to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and doesn't care about like nice clothes and shit. He still wants all of that stuff. Like, it's such an interesting transition point here.
It really is, because once again, self-awareness despite not following through, right? Yeah. And then it does make My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, I mean, the last 4 or 5 songs, but Devil in a New Dress, Runaway, Hell of a Life, Blame Game, Lost in the World, 5 songs are all about romance and how it's impossible for him to still like find romance because he is living this lifestyle. So it's like he actively starts compromising his ability to find love, even though he knows better. There is no clothes that I could buy that could turn back in time, or that could turn back the time. I don't think Genius is entirely correct with some of these like words here and there, but they could turn back the time. Which, just getting at what we were saying earlier about Kanye wishing in some ways that he could go back to a more innocent period. Before he walked this path, before he lost his mom. Could he change, or maybe change how things ended up going? There's no vacation spot I could fly that could bring back a piece of real life. Which, you think about the idea of like taking a vacation. Like, most people take a vacation because it isn't real life. And here Kanye's saying like, oh, like, there is no spot I could go to bring back real life. Yeah, because vacations aren't real.
It again feels like more commentary on 808s, you know, him flying around and like, and I guess his whole career, like graduation, flying around, trying to like find happiness outside of like where he is. Like, he's never looked internally to find it, you know. He's always like thinking of like the things he can grab onto, or the people he can bring into his life, or the people he can influence, but never took the time to concentrate on himself.
Yeah, that is like one of the things missing here, right? he's not saying like, oh, I should sit and reflect on myself, or
Right.
like I should do this. Everything that he's pointing to are all these like superficial external things, which, like, I mean, on the one hand, he is an artist who is getting like self-reflecting on this song. So even the song itself is a process of self-reflection, but it is funny that like everything in the song is lacking that idea of self-reflection.
Yeah, he still needed time to get to that spot. I mean, like, he probably didn't get to it until like yay. Even on the life of Pablo, he's thinking more about the people that matter in his life and how he needs to be to them. I feel like he doesn't really concentrate on himself and who he is and moving forward internally until Ye and Can See Ghosts.
Yeah, everything's external on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fan. I mean, there's internal,
Sure.
like, there's internal stuff going on, but we're seeing the character almost entirely focused externally on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, on Yeezus. Life of Pablo, you're starting to see them, like,
Right.
him finally start to reckon with like, oh, have I been making the right decisions?
Maybe I shouldn't act like a maniac.
Yeah, there's other ways to do this, isn't there? But you're right. Like a lot of that album is still dominated by like him thinking in terms of his relationship with his, like with Kim, with his kids, with the public, with God.
Right.
So he's starting to put himself in context of those people, but it's still putting himself in context of those people rather than just thinking through his own feelings and relationships, which, as you're saying, yay, kids see ghosts. Jesus is king.
Yep.
So then, where are we?
Real
life. What does it feel like? Yeah. I ask you tonight. What does it feel like? Underrated. Because it's like he's talking to the crowd, being like,
Yes.
you're all living real life. Like, I'm asking you, what does it feel like? And they're all just screaming at him, like, Kanye, we're happy to be here, which is even more obvious on the footage that we watched, that YouTube clip. The crowd is so much louder than they are in the recording.
Yeah.
And I do want to come to the crowd's defense a little bit, because I do think if an artist is emoting this much on stage, there's not much they can do. Like, you can either be completely quiet,
Right.
or you can try to yell out support. And I do feel like some people are trying to be supportive in the way, like the only way they think they can. But still, the overall effect of the crowd treating him like an artist performing rather than a person kind of having a mini breakdown on stage is still very striking. And just Kanye setting up this idea too of asking them, you're all real people. What does it feel like to live a real life?
Right. Like it had to be the way it turned out for it to carry as much meaning as it does. And I think that makes it very poignant and striking. But I also think you could look at the song, like you could look at the crowd as a representation of celebrity, as we see Kanye often do whenever he's talking to anybody or interacting. If anybody, like that feels like it's an element of it. And when he looks out into that crowd, you know, this sold out stadium he's performing at, this life he really wanted to be living on graduation, these people become a representation of like what he seeks to attain, like the height of celebrity. And it almost feels like in a way he's reaching out and asking that aura, you know, that entity, like what is it like? Can you help me find what real life's supposed to be? Like, I chased you to find real life. Like, I thought I was going to find fulfillment by doing this, and I'm not getting it. Like, can you help me?
And the answer is no.
Sorry.
The answer is no. I do like too the little bit of the play of like, I ask you tonight, what does it feel like? I ask you tonight to live a real life. How he frames it, you get the duality of I ask you tonight, what does it feel like to live a real life? But also I ask you tonight to live a real life. So you get the question and also the statement. Like, I'm asking you, like, don't be like me, go live a real life.
Yeah.
As well as saying like, hey, can you just tell me what it's like to live a real life? What does it feel like? Which Kanye knew he was living a real life for most of his life at this point.
Right.
And now feels so disconnected from it.
That's a great point, because it's another moment where he's wizened a bit, in the sense that like he actually knows what he should do, and he's telling people like, hey, like live a real life, like don't do what I did. But he's going to keep continuing to live the celebrity life that he doesn't know how to make into a real life. Ooh.
Yeah.
Pinocchio energy.
Yeah. And then we get the chorus, I just want to be a real boy. That statement, I think, coming back in full force. This is the first time he's really said it, right? Yep.
Yeah.
So to live a real life, I just want to be a real boy. They always say Kanye, he keeps it real, boy. I love how he plays on this in the chorus. Pinocchio's story is, I just want to be a real boy. Pinocchio's story goes to be a real boy. So you have Kanye saying, I just want to be a real boy, after talking about, like, I want to live real life. So he wants to, and it sounds in a lot of ways, get out of the celebrity and return to a more innocent time, a time where he can have actual genuine connections and, you know, have a family, have love, et cetera, et cetera. But then he contrasts that with people already say that Kanye, he keeps it real, boy. Because Kanye's the one that's always speaking out, telling the truth. He's the one interrupting, like, award shows to say who should have won. He's the one calling out George Bush. So it's like he's already keeping it real, but that's not enough. And then he relates to Pinocchio, as the phrase, I want to be a real boy, comes from Pinocchio. And Pinocchio's story is, I just want to be a real boy. That's what Pinocchio says. But then Pinocchio's story goes to be a real boy. Pinocchio's story is instructive, right? This is what you need to do to be a real boy. So you just get these little, like, I guess, refractions on the idea of being a real boy, and how close Kanye is to it, but also how far he is to it, and how he's looking to this story for instruction. But at the same time, Pinocchio's story is just a story at the end of the day. It's not like, you can't actually, what can you actually take away from it?
That's a pretty incredible parallel construction there. Like, I feel like you've said all this, but like, no, I'm putting it together in my head, because I don't think I really thought about it. Like, it starts with, I want to be a real boy. And then Kanye has this thought. People say Kanye keeps it real, boy. Like, he is a real boy. Look at him. He's being so real. And Kanye thought, like, if I act this way, like, I'm putting myself down this path to finding fulfillment in, you know, being a real boy, in quotes. But then the next two lines are contrasting that with Pinocchio's story, which is, he also wants to be a real boy, and his story goes to be a real boy. Like, Pinocchio achieves that. And Kanye looks to that story for guidance, but it didn't work out for him. Like, he either didn't make the right decisions, or, like, even though people were telling him he was doing it right, like, he doesn't feel right. Like, nothing is adding up. And my favorite part of that is the fact that, like, these lines aren't flipped. We don't start with, like, Pinocchio's story wanted to be a real boy, and then he had a story, and then Kanye didn't achieve that. We start with Kanye, like, not achieving that, then looking out and seeing Pinocchio's story, and, like, all, like, the guidance that is there and how you get there. But, like, while he's thinking about that story, he knows he didn't achieve that. Like, it's such an interesting energy there.
Yeah, like, how can he even use it at this point? Like, he's looking like, I know how that story goes, but how can that apply to me? Which in the second verse, he's like, Pinocchio lied, and that's what kept him from it. I tell the truth, but he keeps running, which is reinforcing what you're saying. It's like, oh, so if you don't lie, you'll be a real boy. I don't lie, and yet I'm not a real boy. Like, what went wrong for me? And Pinocchio's story, we all, I think, know the Disney version. I think most of us have seen it. In case you haven't, it's just Pinocchio's this, like, cute puppets who has Geppetto as the old man, and then Jiminy Cricket, who's kind of like guiding him, his conscience. And Pinocchio wants to be a real boy, and Geppetto's sick, I think, and he goes out to try to help Geppetto and gets swept up into this, like, kind of dark, cruel world, and at times makes wrong decisions in terms of lying and His nose grows every time he lies. He ends up drinking at one point and getting kidnapped and put into like a child labor camp. Then Geppetto gets swallowed by a whale.
And this is the nice family-friendly cartoonized version.
Yeah, right. And then he ends up like doing good things at the end. He makes the right decisions. He saves Geppetto. And even though he dies, I do believe, the fairy at the end turns him into a real boy and he comes back to life, and everybody lives happily ever after. But Pinocchio, through most of the story, is trying to do the right thing, just kind of struggling in some ways. Mm-hmm. The original story, The Adventures of Pinocchio, which was written in 1881 by Carlo Collodi, is just like horrifying. So he wrote like half of the story, which was supposed to be the full story, and essentially was supposed to be how you shouldn't behave. He wanted kids to know that there are consequences for bad behavior. So essentially, Pinocchio keeps doing things and horrible things happen. At one point, when Jiminy Cricket appears, Pinocchio is just like, look at this cricket, and throws a hammer and kills Jiminy Cricket, and then is haunted by the ghost of Jiminy Cricket. He falls asleep at one point with his feet at a fire, and his feet burn off like to a complete crisp. And Geppetto's kind enough to make him new feet. And then it culminates with Geppetto being sick, Pinocchio getting gold that he's supposed to bring back to help get Geppetto medicine or something. But a fox and a cat ambush Pinocchio because he was going to do something else with the money. He was irresponsible, didn't listen to what he should do. And when this fox and cat find him, they try to get the money from him, but Pinocchio puts it in his mouth. So then they hang Pinocchio. That's where the story is supposed to end, with this fox and cat just being like, yeah, you done messed up. We're going to hang you. And they rope him up, put him over a branch, and hang him. And the publisher... by the neck. Publisher of the story was just like, hey, man, Carlo, could you like not be so dark? Could you maybe just like keep the story going?
We want to maybe turn this into a Disney movie someday.
Yeah. Just have it be happier. Just like a little more like what kids should do, not what they shouldn't do, but can you just show them what they should do? So then Carlo wrote this whole second part where Pinocchio has redemption. He gets cut down from the rope, like some 3 actually like wise men appear and like administer diagnosis of whether he's dead or not, and the fairy saves him, and then Pinocchio goes on to like do the right things and ends up being a real boy at the end of the story. So like the dark fairy tale version ends up having a little bit of a happier ending, but it wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
But it feels very fitting in some ways that Kanye is talking about a story that has such duality to it, to where you have the Disney version of events, right, that are dark but hopeful, and then the original story, which was just tragedy. And he's thinking about celebrity was supposed to be like Disney, and instead it's become a tragedy. It just feels like a very fitting reference for this song, for how he was feeling about his life at this point. Yeah.
And also just the commentary on how fairy tales are classically not happy-go-lucky stories and often have tragedy and sadness and darkness. And I feel like that's 808s in a nutshell. It's the very real story about someone who struggled and never got over something.
Yeah, where the rest of Kanye's discography had kind of been Disney fairy tale like.
Right.
Now we're getting this flip to like, no, which again, not saying that Kanye was intentionally thinking like, oh, I'm going to turn the fairy tale on its head, but like Pinocchio Story does feel like he's
seems pretty blatant.
Yeah. Thanks. At verse 2, then, it's funny, Pinocchio lied, and that's what kept him from it. I tell the truth, and I keep running, which is more, I think, of a focus in the Disney. Actually, he lies in the original as well. Mm-hmm. Man, Pinocchio. Such a
That
little
kid.
liar.
I know.
I know.
He had it coming.
So I tell the truth and I keep running. Yeah. So like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I know the story. I did the opposite of what Pinocchio did. I did the thing that made him a real boy, and yet I keep getting in trouble. I keep getting like yelled at. I keep like ending up in the place that I'm at. It's like I'm looking for something out there, trying to find something. I turn on the TV and see me and see nothing. Whew. So he feels like his life is missing something. So he keeps looking everywhere, running around, trying to find it. And when he turns on the TV, he sees himself and he sees nothing, which recalls Good Life, I think.
Sure.
In the chorus of Good Life, you have Kanye saying, "Now I go for mine, I got to shine. Now throw your hands up in the sky." T-Pain coming in. "I'm going to get on this TV, mama. I'm going to put shit down. Hey, I'm good. Welcome to the good life where we like the girls who ain't on TV." And just getting into a lot of like, look how awesome my lifestyle is. So on Good Life, he is touting the fact that he wants to get on TV, that he wants his mom to see him on TV. Like, how cool will that be for her? And that he's living this good life at this point where he's traveling to all of these places. He has money, he has fame. Good Life is kind of the start, especially on graduation, of him like starting to indulge in celebrity. And they're getting on TV was this great thing. And now his mom's gone. So the person that he was excited to see him on TV, no longer around. And now being on TV doesn't mean anything. When he sees himself on TV, he just sees a hollow person. A facade. Yeah. What does it feel like to live real life, to be real? So he comes back to that question because the person he sees on TV, who is him, isn't real.
Yeah.
Yeah, not some facade on TV that no one can really feel.
Which
And you think
in the
about-
moment of that show, like people aren't listening to him. Like it's feeding exactly what he's saying.
Right? Like, and how can the people in the audience who are real understand the feeling of not being real? So even if they are wanting to commiserate, can they? You know?
Yeah. Especially, at least not on that level. Like, at the heart of the song, like the emotions he's expressing, like these feel like universal things, but to be on his level and to have millions of fans who think they know you when they don't know you at all, like that really elevates that feeling.
Yeah, and he gets into that then because thinking about the fan artist relationship, like, do you really have the stamina for everybody that sees you that say, "Where's my camera?" For everybody that sees you to say, "Sign an autograph," for everybody that sees you crying, they say, "You ought to laugh, you ought to laugh." So those first two lines just about like, "Where's my camera?" "Sign an autograph." It's like fans are great, but fans are also exhausting.
Yes.
Like they just want something from you rather than just saying like, "Thank you." Right? It's like, no, let me get a photo. Let me get an autograph. And then for everybody that sees you crying that say, "You ought to laugh, you ought to laugh." And yeah, that's the response, right? You're crying. And all that people can say to you, maybe not just your fans, but maybe your peers, other people in your life are like, no, you should be happy, man. You should be laughing. It actually makes me think of something from Watchmen. If you've ever read the comic book Watchmen or watched the movie Watchmen, there's something from Rorschach's journal where he says, and Rorschach talks in a very weird way, so bear with me here. "Heard joke once. Man goes to doctor. Says he's depressed." I want to do the voice. "Says life seems harsh and cruel. Says he feels all alone in a threatening world where what lies ahead is vague and uncertain. Doctor says, treatment is simple. Great clown, Pagliacci, is in town tonight. Go and see him. That should pick you up. Man burst into tears. Says, but doctor, I'm Pagliacci." It's just like, yeah, what are you supposed to do when like you're the source of entertainment and you're the one that's sad? And this article on Stack Exchange talks about how they're actually, this is a common anecdote that kind of goes through. There's a version of the Swiss clown Grok, and then another version that involves a clown named Grimaldi, both of which are from the 1800s. So like a very old phrase, but all the time it involves this person seeing a doctor, saying they're really sad, and the doctor tells them, you know, you just need to laugh. Like, go see this very funny person, and each time they're like, I'm that person.
Yeah.
So
it seems to really get at the I want to be a real boy, or just desire for people to recognize you as a real person. You're not allowed to cry. Like, you're the entertainer. You're not allowed to be this emotionally tortured person. You have to always be on. Like, you always have to be a celebrity and entertain us.
Or even just people expect you, like, they think that because you make others laugh, or because you make others happy, or because you're on stage, you're not
Right.
sad.
Yes.
And
right.
there's that difference between like the clown being able to go and make others laugh and the clown actually being incredibly sad. And there's something with Kanye going to make inspirational music, making this hit music, like having all this love from the crowd, but also not being recognized as a real person anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so much to take away.
That's a huge part of it too. Like, as you say, like, he made inspirational music. Like, he wanted to be this person that they want him to be, you know? Like you ought to laugh. Like, you ought to beat Kanye. Like, you should be the guy that like everyone looked up to and like inspired so many people, and be living that life you described in these songs. Yet, thinking of Graduation, we know a lot of those songs where he's living the good life, in quotes, like, are actually sad. Like, a lot of this image he gives off was just that. It was part of the image. It was part of the art. And because of that, like, we never really got a true look into who he was.
Yeah, because if you look at Good Life in and of itself on the album, you're just like, oh, cool. Like, what a inspiring song. But when you look at it in context of the album, you're like, oh, yeah, this is part of his journey to losing Chicago and feeling alienated from, like, he pissed off Jay and is starting to like lose the people around him because he's getting an ego. Like,
Right.
Okay. Yeah, man. Kanye's discography, man. Okay. So we get to the chorus. I just want to be a real boy. Pinocchio Story goes. I just want to be a real boy. Pinocchio Story goes, which he's ending off there as almost like he has become Pinocchio the puppet, right? Like, it's no longer just like Pinocchio Story goes, I just want to be a real boy, but Pinocchio Story goes, and there is no Geppetto to guide me, no one right beside me. It's like Kanye now feels he is this Pinocchio figure.
Yeah. And no Geppetto, which would be like, I mean, you could use his mom as a stand-in in a way, but like just any sort of guiding force, like somebody who can make sense of this life that makes no sense.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the, I mean, he goes right to his mom as well in the lyrics, but you're right. There is who replaces her. Right. Because it's not only did he lose his Geppetto, but yeah, who is the Geppetto to guide him now? Like, is there anyone that can step in and be that person?
Yeah. And if there's any evidence of how far he's gotten away from God, like, this is it. Like, he's still not looking to that force as something that can help guide him.
That's a great point. You just think about, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Which in fact he might actively, it's an assumption to make, but I think it's common for people that have lost someone to start to say, like, why? Like, why, God, why? And that could be a reason. Like, he doesn't understand why his mom's gone and doesn't want to turn to God, because maybe there is like some blame going on there.
Sure.
There is no Geppetto to guide me, no one right beside me. The only one was behind me. I can't find her no more. I can't call her no more. I can't. Which just makes you think about Coldest Winter and Her Love's 1,000 Miles Away. And just, yeah, the idea that he has lost his mom. The only one that come out on the tour and stays. Which I feel like it would be hard for everybody to like go on tour with him and stay. Like,
Well, I guess he could be like referring to Alexis or like someone in your life you would expect to do something like that, but like your mom's the only one that would.
yeah, right. Donda goes to every show. She's like supportive. I mean, I feel like Kim went to a lot of like Pablo tour stuff. I don't know if she was at like every Yeezus tour. I mean, they just had North.
That would be
But
crazy.
yeah. It is a lot, but it also shows just like the love he had from Donda, right?
Right. I think that's the important thing is like, yeah, you wouldn't expect people to do that, but his mom did do that. Like that's how there she was for him, and he does not have that anymore.
And then back when I was living at home, and this was all a big dream. I feel like the line's actually back when I was living in her room, and this was all a big dream. I was listening to it earlier. I was just like, it doesn't sound like at home at all. It sounds like in your room.
Well, good luck getting that changed on Genius, Chris.
I tried changing a comma earlier, and they won't let it go through. Bothersome. But the same thing applies. Like there was a time when he was like living with her, and all of this was a big dream, and the fame will be get got. I don't know if that's what he says either, but just this idea that he will have fame at some point. And the day I moved to LA, maybe that was all my fault. So you start to have Kanye flashing back, which actually in some ways has that parallel construction to like, I can't turn back in time. Like he's already talked about like going back in time previously, and now he's literally in his mind going back in time to before fame, when he was still with his mom, and things felt, I think, a little more real. But then the day he moved to LA, which I think he probably associates in some ways with artificiality, being fake, like putting on for appearances. And he says, maybe that was all my fault. Was he the one, because he moved to LA, to set everything in motion? And I think Kanye has even said before, like he wondered if he never moved to LA in like interviews, would his mom have gotten the surgery that she did? Which it was the complications from the surgery that resulted in her death.
Yeah. It's interesting thinking of this line as well, because here he's thinking backwards and thinking like, what if I didn't go to LA? Like, what if I didn't make all of these decisions? Like, would my life be different? But then to think ahead on like, why am I blanking, the 30 hours where he's reflecting back on this moment almost like fondly, almost like, oh, look at me back then, like all dewy eyed and ready. And there's like a certain fondness with that memory now. It's just interesting to see how his perception of this moment of time would change. And of course here, like, yeah, this is what you would think. Like if I had never moved to LA, like there's just such deep regret suddenly permeating in him because of the life he's living, because he lost his mom. Like he's so stuck in it and regretting at the same time. All of that is so heavy and emotionally wrenching in a way that it's coming out here in this song that is so different than where we see him now, where maybe he's slowly starting to come to peace with that.
Yeah, because 30 hours, it's in the context of him thinking about where he's at with Kim at that time versus back in the day when he left Chicago and was traveling back and forth with the girl he was seeing at the time, which I don't think was Samiki Rainey.
Yeah, that's what I was going to guess, but I can't keep track.
Yeah, I don't think it was Alexis either. So it has to be like Samiki or someone else like that. But yeah, just it does feel rueful, right? Like, remember those times? Like, I was making that drive. Like, the relationship sucked, but it's like, yeah, it's not in the intensity that this has.
Yeah, I guess he's weighing the fallout with like the rewards of celebrity. Like the fallout was intense, but like what he can now achieve with the celebrity, like there's so much he could do.
Yeah, which I mean, that's where the life of Pablo ends up, right? With Saint Pablo, with him thinking
Right.
like, how can I be this messenger? How can I
Yeah.
be someone that's making a difference?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe a lot of that too is him getting over the fact that it wasn't his fault. Like here, he's blaming
Right.
himself, and that's contextualizing things. Where by 2016, he's no longer necessarily blaming himself, so can think of the move to LA in much better terms.
Yeah. Right.
Chasing everything we seen up on the TV screen, which just gets back to, or all my fault to be a real boy, chasing the American dream. That all my fault to be a real boy is interesting because it's almost like in the context of he thought he was like in chasing the American dream was being a real boy, but I guess in some ways all of us do chase the American dream, right?
Yeah, I think it's just the point of that line is to be this is what I thought being a real boy was.
Yeah.
Like this is what I thought life should be, and suddenly like I have that life and it's shitty.
Yeah, you're chasing the American dream, which I mean, he'd go on. The outro song on the next album is "Who Will Survive in America." So here he talks about the American dream being this thing that you chase and is ultimately unsatisfying. And then in the next album, reinforces that with this Gil Scott Heron sample of "Who Will Survive in America," which, okay. Chasing everything we've seen up on the TV screen. The revolution will not be televised. Also gets at what we were talking about on Good Life. He was chasing being on the TV screen, and what we were talking about with All Falls Down. Like you're chasing these like riches and you're trying to style yourself. And I think he goes on to really deconstruct that idea on Yeezus as well.
Yeah. And another All Falls Down reference with the Benz, right?
Yeah. I mean, he talks about a Benz on that. Benz comes up a lot for Kanye. And when the Benz was left and the clothes was left and the hose was left, you talk the hose to death thinking that the money, which, yeah, it's funny thinking about him like with these girls that just want like to party, essentially. And he's like talking them to death.
Yep.
Just
It
wants
just
to emote.
immediately recalls like drunken hot girls or this life he wanted to be living, what it meant to have like all of these women in your life. And now on the other side of that, again, like looking back at that, like what did you sacrifice to have all these things you think you needed in your life?
Yeah. And what kind of, you're trying to have like a deeper connection with them at times than they want to have with you.
Yes.
And how pointless that is, which gets back to Blood on the Leaves and most of Yeezus.
Telling you, Pinocchio Story, it's everything. Everything revolves around Pinocchio Story.
Yep. You spend the dough to death, $53 million in debt, and tell me what be left for a real boy. Yeah, so if you're living this lifestyle and going this like crazy, what is left, you know? Mm-hmm. If you do finally settle down, if you're able to like make a turn, like will there be anything for him? They say, Kanye, you keep it too real, boy, which, ouch.
Oh, wow.
Like, is that the thing that's gone wrong? So it's not just about like telling the truth. It's like you keep it too real. Like,
that's
there
pretty
is
incredible.
Such a thing. Yeah.
Like you could see how that would send him down the path again of what we see on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Yeezus and everything. Like he does keep keeping it too real. Like he just steps further in that direction because I mean, now I'm just applying my own meaning to it, but like they told, like he knew what path he needed to take. Like people say you keep it so real. I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep living this life. Like this is what you do. And then he kept it too real. And it almost feels like a defense mechanism or just a way of combating the pain to just keep being like that and to go even further down that path.
Yeah, like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, it starts a combative response, right?
Right.
It's like he's getting praised. He keeps it real. Okay, I keep it real. Like, then why aren't things working for me? And then one day they're like, you kind of keep it too real. And you just throw up your hands and you're like, oh, you want to see, like, me keeping it too real?
All right, let's go, Yeezus.
Yeah. Which it's hard to keep talking about how much he's talking about like keeping it real and not think about how the next album is called My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
reality versus fantasy. Reality versus fantasy. We talked about it on the intro of this. We talked about it on Coldest Winter, but it just seems like he was already primed to start diving into that.
Yeah.
And getting at this idea of like, my life is no longer real. It is a twisted fantasy.
Ooh, we're going to be talking about that album soon.
Yeah. And then perspective, this is where I tried to edit the comma. On Genius, it says perspective and wise, comma, man say, when it's perspective, comma, and wise man say. So it's like they say Kanye, you keep it to real boy perspective. Like, okay, he's finally getting perspective on something. And wise men say, one day you'll find your way. The wise men say, you'll find your way, you'll find your way, wise men say. So I mean, there's a little bit of hope at the end with like the wise men saying like, you'll find your way, like everything will be okay. Just give it some time. But it's still different than you'll never figure out real love. Mm-hmm. I guess there's maybe an implication of like, maybe you don't have to figure out real love in order to have real love. Or maybe you can still find your way and it might never understand some of the things you don't understand, but like things can reorient themselves. I don't know. I just find a little bit of hope in those last lines.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what Kanye's going for. And I don't know if that's even a play off the Elvis song, but it feels suddenly more in line with it, when in the beginning it was like the antithesis of the Elvis song. Like here suddenly at the end, I mean, we can even remove the Elvis song from it. Like the fact that Kanye is just now going against what he said at the beginning. And there's this sudden hope in a song that isn't filled with hope. I think, again, it really points for the direction he went and how he didn't just wallow like we saw on this album and like we see a lot in this song. Like he's somebody who started, like he really needed to find he needed to become a real boy. Like he needed to find real life. He needed to find his path. And you're not going to do it by just sitting around and complaining and think like you need to go and move and take action. And I feel like that's kind of the energy I get here at the end is like my whole life I've done all these things I was supposed to do. Like nothing makes sense. I have no guide. Where does someone like that go from here? You just move forward and like you'll find it eventually.
Yep. Like it's down there. Whatever road you're taking off tonight, like you'll find your way to what you're looking for at some point. And I think there are other arguments that can be said. Somebody might point out that it's just showing that there's like contradictions to what the wise men say. And maybe you can't take anything they say as true, which in some ways is hopeful.
Yeah.
But is in some ways kind of depressing because you're like, they say that, but like, what do they really know? I mean, that the last line is like wise men say. I can feel somebody reading that as ironic, right? Mm-hmm. Like wise men say a lot. Can you really believe everything they say? And then even if you're going back to the Elvis recommendation, or the Elvis connection, not recommendation, the Elvis connection.
Although we do recommend that song.
Yes. I've grown past my younger years hatred of Elvis.
Still can't listen to Hound Dog, but
ain't nothing but a hound dog. There's something when he says wise men say only fools rush in, and then he rejects it. You could even try to make the argument like the wise men say you'll find your way, and Kanye's like, nah.
Yeah.
Like I'm rejecting that. There is also something too. I don't know when Kanye first saw the movie The Holy Mountain, but we've talked about how The Holy Mountain, especially if you listen to our Dissect season on Yeezus, that Jodorowsky builds that movie to a point where these characters go looking for immortality at the Holy Mountain. And they go from their realities to this fantastic kind of fantasy world. And they finally reach the mountain and they're told they're in a movie. And the movie, like the character that they encounter actually starts pointing out the cameras and the crew and starts speaking directly to the audience and tells them that they need to embrace reality. and focus more on reality than fantasy. And that was a movie that Kanye like adores and had on repeats during the making of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, right?
Yeah, was that it? That sounds
Or was
right.
it-
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he'd use the mountain
Right.
imagery essentially in Yeezus. It's just something. And then Violent Crimes is another thing that kind of recalls this idea of like waking up and getting back to reality. So it's just, this starts a motif that is going to run through nearly a decade of Kanye's work.
Pinocchio Story. It begins and ends with Pinocchio Story.
Yep. It's amazing.
Love it.
Any final Pinocchio Story thoughts?
No, I feel like I'm realizing now that you really, not that I think we can technically do any Kanye song justice. Like, you should just go listen to the song. Always, like, that. There's where you'll really find the meaning, and our words can like bring perspective to things. But this is a song that it's just tough to talk about. Like, you really have to listen to it and be in it and feel the emotion of it. And I feel like all of these things we've talked about like kind of come up, especially if you know Kanye and you've paid attention to his career and the path he's gone down with his life and his decisions. Like, man, this song just fucking hits. Like, all these lines hit. You could perfectly see him in this place and time. It's just such an important song in his career.
Yeah. Just, you wouldn't know it at the time, but as we were saying earlier, as each album has come out, as we've seen Kanye like go through what he's gone through in the 13 years since the song came out, it just feels more relevant all the time.
Yeah. Wow. So good.
Yeah. Amazing. So, okay, this concludes the episode. We'll be doing our recap of 808s and Heartbreak, going over how we felt about the album, re-ranking our top songs in the aftermath of it, what we learned along the way, and just final thoughts and conclusions before heading into either our season on Donda, since it is Tuesday, August 3rd, and we are apparently only 2 days away from Donda, or we will be getting into My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. So either way, you have something great to look forward to.
And you should definitely be watching our YouTube channel for Donda updates, because I'm sure and by we I mostly mean Chris, will be covering the Donda news. But then we're probably going to try to plan something with the Donda live stream, right?
Yeah, I think we might do some kind of like stream leading up to the actual stream, and then something in the aftermath of it. I don't know if we want to be like on stream while it's happening, if we want to like focus more on watching it, or what.
Maybe we stream when does it premiere? At like 8:00?
I think it's at 9.
Okay, so we'll start streaming at 9, and then when the show starts at 11, we can end the live stream.
right, and then do a follow-up and be like, crazy, right? All right, stream over. Though, if I did learn anything, going on the Los Pollos TV Twitch made me realize how much of a Twitch show can just be like sitting, like just hanging out.
Right.
It doesn't have to be like constant like entertainment, constant doing things, and people are just kind of into it.
Yeah.
So maybe we do just sit there and watch the live stream
and people
have some reactions.
It'd be cool.
Yeah. All right. We'll see. We'll get back to you. But you can find out more details on Twitter or the YouTube channel. And then if you're listening to this podcast, we have been doing video versions of the podcast now. So if you want to watch this rather than just listen to it, you can find it on the YouTube channel.
Yeah. If you want to see my gross unshaven face, head over to YouTube.
Beautiful. I think you're beautiful, Travis. Just the way you are.
All right. So yeah, stay beautiful and stay wavy, everybody.
Keep it loopy. Cheers.